Hi, and welcome to episode 36 of the Noble Character Crafts podcast. My name is Amy, and I am coming to you from eastern Nebraska, where I live on a farm with my husband and our 5 children. Today is Friday, August 17th, 2018. This is a podcast all about my life as a knitter, a crocheter, a hand dyer of yarn, and a sewist. Thank you so much for joining me today. A huge welcome to any new or returning viewers. I really appreciate you joining me, and I hope that you enjoyed this episode. You can find me online on Instagram and Etsy at Noble Character Crafts. You can find me on Ravelry at Noble Character, and I also have a group for this podcast on Ravelry under Noble Character Crafts Podcast. In that group, you will be able to find the show notes for this episode as well as previous episodes and several other chatter threads. So I would love it if you would join us over there. You can also get in touch with me through my email at noblecharactercrafts@yahoo.com. I am currently hosting a knit-along with the ladies of the Meanwhile at the Castle podcast. It is called the Be My Neighbor Cal, and it is for any cardigan that you would like to knit or crochet in any size. It can be from a newborn size up to an adult, and it is in honor of Mr. Rogers, hence the name Be My Neighbor Cal. And it is also for any projects that you would like to make that are gift or charity projects. So a wide variety of things apply for this knit along or crochet along, you could say as well. And I would love it if you would join the knit along. There is a chatter thread as well as a finished object thread in my Ravelry group, and then you can also definitely go over to the Meanwhile at the Castle Ravelry group. I'm not sure if they have opened up their threads for this Cal, but you can certainly check that out, and also, of course, check out their podcast. It is one of my favorites, so I highly recommend you checking out their podcast as well. And this knit along is running until the end of the year at least. It may even go longer than that. I am going to be pulling prizes, one prize per month from the finished object thread for this knit along. And I believe that the ladies in the Meanwhile at the Castle podcast are also going to be drawing prizes for this knit along several times throughout the rest of this year at the very least. Like I said, it may go longer than that. So again, I would love it if you would join us. If you have anything that you would like to knit or crochet for gifts, especially coming up on, Christmas is coming, and or any charities, and then again, any size cardigan if you would like to make one of those. I have a few finished objects to share with you this week. The first one is the Entrechat shrug that I made for my daughter. And I realized that this actually applies for the Be My Neighbor Cal as well, since it's a gift for my daughter. Sometimes I don't think of things that I make for my children as gifts, but of course it's not for me, so I guess it does count as a gift for my daughter. And this was such a fun knit. I really enjoyed it so much. This is, again, the Entrechat. It's called Entrechat Fingering, I believe, or Fingering Entrechat. It's by Lisa Chemery. And it was such an enjoyable knit. I really loved making this. It worked up so quickly. When I podcasted last week, I had just started it and only had worked a couple of rows, and I was able to finish it, even though I really did not work on this monogamously. I did have a few other projects that I worked on as well, but it worked up so quickly. It is worked in fingering weight yarn. I used my Pitter Patter base, which is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and this is in my healing colorway. I had a few extra skeins of this left over from previous projects, and I was hoping that I would have enough to finish this project using those up, and I did. I had 6 grams left over. I should weigh the finished project. I haven't done that yet, but I think it was around 80 grams that it took. I did have to eliminate one extra garter ridge right here along the edge, although I probably could have squeezed it in with that 6 grams I had left over, but I was afraid of running out of that yarn, and so I was supposed to have 6 garter ridges along the hem here, but I only did 5, which I don't think that makes much of a difference at all. So I'm super happy with how this turned out. It fits my daughter very nicely. I made the largest size. This pattern comes from 3 months all the way up to 8 years, and my daughter is going to be 8 in January. So I made the 8-year size, and it fits her beautifully right now, but I think that she'll be able to wear it for hopefully, at least a year. And yeah, I used US size 5. Is that right? Yeah, US size 5, which are 3.75 millimeter needles. And I got a gauge of 26.5 stitches to 4 inches. The recommended gauge is 26 stitches to 4 inches, so my gauge was a little bit loose, but not really enough to make much of a difference, I don't think. It's worked from the top down, and I love the construction of it. So you start with this garter ridged collar, and you start the raglan increases, and you work until you get to the bottom here, and then you cast off the sleeve stitches, and you pick up stitches along here on both sides, and then you start working just back and forth along that whole, you can see how that patterned piece runs along there, so that's what you're working. Then after you get done with this beautiful patterned section, I love how that looks. I think it's so pretty. Then you add extra stitches along here to make this ruffled section, which is so pretty as well. And yeah, you just continue working in stockinette for a few inches and end with another set of garter ridges. And you add a buttonhole at the top. I had this little flower button in my stash, and it worked beautifully on the yarn. Of course, my daughter loves flowers and the color pink. She's a very girly girl, and so she absolutely loves this. I hadn't been telling her that I was making it for her, and she came in. I was almost done with it, and she came into my room. I was working on it. She said, "Mom, who are you making that pink sweater for?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I gotta find a little girl who likes pink." And she, of course, knew it was for her then, and because she's our only girl. And anyway, she's very happy with it, and I love how it worked up. I would really like to make maybe more of these for her. And I'm wondering if maybe I can adjust the pattern to make it even larger as she grows. Maybe I can figure out how to do that. I'm not sure, but it's such a fun, easy pattern, and I think it would pair so nicely with so many of her dresses. So many of her dresses are sleeveless, and of course that's a little too cold in air-conditioned buildings and things like that. So, or as the weather turns cooler as well, I think this will be nice to just throw on over top of a dress. So hopefully she'll get a lot of use out of this, and I was glad to be able to use up some extra yarn that I had on hand. So I'm very happy with this pattern. This is the second time I have made one of the patterns by Lisa Chemery. She's also known as Froginette on Instagram. And I really love the way that she writes patterns. She makes them it's very easy to follow along with her patterns, and I just really I have enjoyed making both. I made the Entrechat bonnet as well as the Entrechat fingering shrug. So highly recommend her patterns from what I have made anyway. I have another finished object, which was also a very fun project. I made this. It is called the At Your Service Knit Cloth, and it is a pattern by Yarnspirations, and it is a free pattern that is both on Ravelry, but also I think I'm pretty sure when you click on the Ravelry button, it takes you to the Yarnspirations website where you can get this pattern. And I really love how this turned out, and it was so much fun to make. It worked up really quickly. I think it took me maybe 4 or 5 days. Of course, again, I wasn't working on this monogamously either. But it's made using 100% cotton yarn. I used, actually I don't have the label for the cone of this variegated yarn that I used, but I think it is, it's not Peaches and Cream, it's Lily and Sugar. Is that what it's called? Sugar? I don't know. I'll put it down below. But it's in the Emerald Isle colorway. And then the top section I did use Peaches and Cream in the Ecru colorway. I used so the pattern calls for US size 7 needles, I believe. Yeah, which are 4.5 millimeter, but I went down to a US size 6, which is 4 millimeter, needles. Just from my experience of working with cotton, I usually have a much looser gauge. And even with going down to a US size 6, I still had a very loose gauge. I got 16 stitches to 4 inches, and the pattern calls for you to get 20 stitches to 4 inches. So my gauge was still quite loose. The pattern says that the finished object is supposed to measure 11 inches across, and mine measures 12 inches across. And then you're also supposed to work this seed stitch pattern, which was so much fun to work. I don't know that I've made a project with seed stitch yet, but I really enjoyed it. And I love the texture that it makes. But anyway, it says to work that seed stitch pattern for 8 inches, but since mine was measuring 12 inches across instead of 11, I worked 9 inches tall instead of only 8 inches, just to make it proportionate to what, the original design was. Anyway, as you can see, you start with a garter ridge again, and then you keep the garter ridge on each side, and then work the seed stitch pattern in the middle here, of course. Then you start doing some decreases here to shape this on either side, and then you just work this section in a garter stitch and make a buttonhole. And again, I used another one of those flower buttons that I had on hand, and it worked well for this project as well. And this is also going to be part of the Be My Neighbor cowl, because I am going to be saving this for Christmas, a Christmas gift. I'm not exactly sure who I will give it to, but I think that this project would make such a nice gift for several people in my family. So I think I'll probably be making more of these. Like I said, I really enjoyed making this, and I think I will probably make quite a few more for Christmas. So I highly recommend this pattern as well. So I'm super happy with the finished objects that I have been able to get done this week. My work in progress, I only have one work in progress right now, which isn't going to last long. I'm going to be casting on some more projects soon. I already have my yarn caked up for the next few projects that I want to make, but the only project that I have right now is my Birdie Fair Isle cardigan, which is also for the Be My Neighbor cowl. But I had some problems with my progress on this project. So last time I recorded a podcast, I had shown you that I was already into the Entrechat section of the cardigan, where I was making the swallow pattern. And, oh, I forgot to put my wedding ring on. I feel naked. I need my wedding ring. There, much better. When I'm knitting, sometimes my wedding ring twists around on my hand and pokes my fingers and gets in the way. So a lot of times when I'm knitting, I take my ring off. Anyway, okay, so I had shown you last time that I was in the middle of the Entrechat section. First time I've ever worked in Entrechat. The pattern actually doesn't call for you to be working in Entrechat, but I had read on several project pages that people said that the swallow pattern would be worked better in using Entrechat because there is such a large gap in between each swallow. So I did that, and I got all the way through the Entrechat section of making the swallow pattern, and I was really unsure about my tension. It looked like my tension wasn't great. So I thought, I'm just going to block this and see if it, because a lot of times with color work, people say, and I have experienced that once you block it, things look so much better. So I went ahead and blocked what I had done, and I will insert a picture here of how that looked after it was blocked. And as you can see, the tension is still pretty bad even after blocking it. So I decided to rip it back all the way. I had thought about only going back to the color work and trying that over, but I really, as I had mentioned in my last episode, I really wasn't happy with how loose the ribbing was. So I have decided to make quite a few adjustments to the needle sizes that I am using. So I am going to start off the ribbing with a US size 5, again 3.75 millimeter. I had originally made that using a US size 7, 4.5 millimeter, but I want it quite a bit tighter, so I'm going to go down to a 5. So I have just started casting it back on again, and using a size 5. And I am going to again add the stitches as I had done originally. The pattern doesn't call for this pattern to be worked in the round. I am just adding 5 extra steek stitches so that I can work it in the round and then steek the cardigan once it's completed. And then I'm happy with the US size 8 that I was using for the main body of the cardigan. I was getting good gauge with that, but the color work, the gauge was too tight. So instead of I had gone up to a US size 9, I'm going to adjust that and go up to a US size 10 for the color work. But then when I was done with that first little section of color work using the gold and the dark charcoal color, and I was just working the blue, there's quite a few rows there of only the blue color, and so you're not doing color work for those few rows, and my gauge was too loose using the US size 9. So I'm going to switch back to a US size 8 for that section, and I think I'm probably going to stick at a US size 8 for the Entrechat section as well, but I need to be really careful with the floats for the Entrechat section, not to pull those too tight. When I was working the Entrechat section before, when I would start a new, when I would start the new section of each swallow, the float that went from the previous row to the new row was so loose, and so I was having to rip that back several times and make it tighter because it was like a really big strand of yarn for some reason that I thought looked way too loose, but I should have just left it alone, I think, because in the end those Entrechat sections were like too tight. So I'm hoping that I can just stick with a US size 8 for that section and be really careful to make sure that my Entrechat floats are loose enough. Better to be too loose, I think, than to be too tight, because if there's a few extra loose threads on the inside, I could always, stitch those down to tighten them up. But obviously, if it's too tight, you can't do much about it besides start over again. So anyway, I was quite disappointed to have to rip my work out, but I think that I will be much happier with it in the end if I do it right. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to do the heart. There's a heart section on the very back of the cardigan. I can show you here. But when I worked it, I did not like the looks of it. Of course, it was too tight, so it looked like a cat face. I don't know, the points on the heart were super pointy, and I don't know, it didn't look very pretty. But again, my floats weren't great, so maybe if I would do that better, it would look better. But I'm kind of thinking maybe I'll just not include the heart. I don't know, I can't decide yet if I should do it or not. Maybe the birds are worked for a few rows before you do the heart, so maybe I'll see how it's going with the swallows before I decide if I'm going to include the heart or not. But I'm not 100% sure if I will do that heart or not. So anyway, I am excited to try it again, and hopefully things will go a lot smoother this time. So, I'm using all Wool of the Andes, Knit Picks Wool of the Andes yarn, worsted weight, and the 4 different colors I'm using are Mink Heather. The blue is called Wonderland Heather. The charcoal is called Onyx Heather. And the gold is Wheat. So I need to get working on that again, or try that out again, and hopefully it will go better. It is being held in my favorite Tanny Casey project bag. I just absolutely love this bag. So my other work in progress is the 2018 collaboration Afghan. So as I showed you last time, I had received the final square that I needed to start piecing that Afghan together, and I have I took quite a bit of time laying out all of the squares and rearranging them into different, arrangements to see how I liked the colors, laid out together. I had originally tried just random, I just put all the squares down randomly, and I really did not like the way that looked. It was just it didn't look cohesive. And then I tried a few different ways of fading it from light to dark, kind of from corner to corner, and I liked that, but I don't know, it was kind of, somebody had mentioned that it you know, it was kind of hard to get the cool versus the warm colors to lay out nicely so that it was an easy flow, I guess, from light to dark. So instead, the final way that I decided to lay it out is to put all of the most saturated colors around the border in a rainbow order. So starting in one corner, I started with a bright reddish pink color, and then kind of faded down into orange and yellow, and then to green, and in the other corner I have some deep blues, and then up into purples. So I'll insert a picture here of the layout that I have decided on so you can kind of see. And then, so the most saturated colors are on the outside, and then as I go towards the middle, I try to fade them into the lightest colors. So it's, you know, probably not perfect, but I did the best that I could to try to arrange them in a way that I thought looked really neat. So I'm really happy with the final layout that I got, and I have started piecing it together. I should just mention that if you have not tuned in before, this Afghan is a collaboration that I have organized with 48 indie yarn dyers. I asked each of them to knit or crochet a 7-inch square and mail it to me, and then I am piecing this into an Afghan that I will then be sending over to Lisa of Indie Untangled, and it will be on display at the Indie Untangled Trunk Show in October. And one of the attendees of the trunk show will win this Afghan. So that is super exciting, and I'm so excited to show you what I've gotten done so far. Only the top row is done so far, but it is progress, so that's good. So I am just going to be stitching each of the 8 rows together first, and then I will piece each of the rows together. One of the trickiest parts is lining them up perfectly, because, you know, though people did the best that they could to give me a 7-inch square, as things, you know, I know several, probably almost all of the people blocked their squares before they sent them to me, and then I blocked some also to be 7 inches, but like with this garter stitch that so many people put in their squares, it is stretchy and it kind of goes back on itself. So some of the squares are not perfectly 7 inches. So that's one of the biggest challenges, is trying to make it piece together in a way that, you know, they all will match, to hopefully make a Afghan that lays nicely and, you know, is squared or rectangle. Anyway, I'll just tell you each of these squares. This is from Angie of Camel City Dye Works. This one is from Lavender Loon Yarn Co. Yeah. This is from Bad Mom Yarns. This is from Hello Stella. This one is from Fluffy You Fiber Farm. And this one is from Sandpiper Yarn Co., I believe. So anyway, I'm really enjoying how this is. I'm enjoying putting this together. I really enjoy seaming things together, oddly enough. I know a lot of people don't, but I really do enjoy it. I'm using a mattress stitch to join each of them, so it makes a really nice seam, or invisible seam. You know, you can't really see it very well, and I think it's working up nicely so far. So I'm excited to continue working on this, and hopefully I'll have a lot of progress next time I podcast to show you. And then I have been searching on Ravelry for a few borders that I like, and hopefully I can find a border that I can add on. I haven't decided if I want to knit or crochet it yet. I don't know. We'll see what I come up with. This is kind of fun to see. Here is the stack of all the other squares that I have. Yeah, they're all laid out in order, how I have them lined up. So anyway, that's kind of fun to see them all stacked up together. So those are all of the works in progress. I don't have a lot going right now, which I really like. I really don't like to have more than 3 works in progress going at a time. Once I get over 3 projects, it stresses me out, and I hate it when I have too many whips. I have a hard time remembering what I was doing when I get back to a project, because obviously there's going to be at least one project that you have to put down for a while if you have too many whips, and I hate having to go back and relearn what I already knew at one time, but I'm like, now where was I and how did I do this? If I just stick to one, or if I just stick to a few projects, then it's so much easier for me to, remember what I'm doing and get them done quicker. So that's what I prefer. But like I said, I'm going to be casting on at least one more project tonight, maybe another project tonight or tomorrow. We'll see. I haven't done any sewing this week. I haven't even touched my sewing machine, except for I learned a little trick from, I think, Julie. I know it came from Julie of Sweet Sparrow Yarns, but I think it was just on one of her Instagram stories that she showed that she sews her patterns together instead of stapling them. She just runs a stitch along the actual paper. So I've started doing that with all of my patterns that have more than one page, and that works out so well. And she just said that's so much nicer because it doesn't snag the yarn. Your yarn doesn't get snagged on a staple if you sew it. So I recommend it if you have a sewing machine handy. Give that a try. Okay, so the only other thing that I have to share with you this week is my shawl kit. So every time I record a podcast, I like to show 3 skeins of yarn that would work well for a shawl set, just to give you an idea of the different colorways that are in my shop. So on my Etsy shop, I have several different colorways that are available on all 9 of my bases at all times. So I don't do regular shop updates. I just always keep all of my colorways available at all times. So that's why I just like to share with you a few of the different colors that I have that work well together, to give you an idea, so that you can, kind of see how things pair up together. And again, this week I have a new colorway to share with you. So here is the set that I have put together. It's kind of wild for me to have 3 different speckled. I usually put at least 1 or 2 solid skeins with my shawl sets, but I'm being adventurous today and putting 3 different speckled colorways together, which I just really loved how they worked together, and I thought that would be a really fun shawl set. So the new colorway is this one, and I'm so pleased with this one. It is called Better Than Jewels. And I had tried to make this colorway previously on some test skeins, and I gifted them to my cousin. So Allie, if you're watching, this may look familiar, but it's a little bit different than the skeins that I had gifted to you. But I am so happy with how this turned out. It has a base of a real light pink, but you really don't see it very much because it is over dyed, hand painted with so many colors. So I've got some fuchsia, purple, blue, indigo, deep blue, and teal, turquoise, bright green. So there's so many fun colors in there, and I absolutely love this. I can't wait to knit it up, and I have it set aside for a project that I'm hoping to cast on soon as well. And each of my colorways are inspired from a proverb, as well as my business name. My business name comes from Noble Character Crafts, comes from Proverbs 31. And each of my colorways are inspired from a proverb as well. And Better Than Jewels comes from Proverbs 8, verse 11, which says, "For wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her." And then the other colorways I've grabbed here are my Friend colorway. So this is just a light purple base, and it's speckled with fuchsia and purple, plum, blue, green. So it has a lot of those same colors in it as well. And the third colorway is my Cool Spirit colorway. So it's this nice light teal base, and then it has navy blue speckles on it. So again, here they are together. Yeah, so if any of you would like to check out my Etsy shop, I would really appreciate that. So we have had a good week. Not much has gone on out of the ordinary, except that my daughter lost another tooth. And I have to tell you the story. She says, "Mom, I would really like to have a surprise instead of money under my pillow, but please don't let it be anything that's knitted." Okay. She knows me well that usually my gifts are knitted. I found a necklace in my jewelry box that I gifted to her instead, so she was very happy with that. I think that's all I have to share with you this week. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give me a thumbs up. I would appreciate that. And subscribe to this channel if you would like. I would appreciate that as well. Thanks again so much for joining me. I hope you all have a great week ahead. Bye-bye.